Welcome to this new edition of the Ajit, Chak, Korff show on Daily World Television. We are here to discuss the latest development in the United States today. It seems that a new bill has been reintroduced in the US Congress to debate on the issue as to whether or not US companies should be allowed to outsource call centers to nations like India and Philippines. This has been going on ever since the Obama administration was in power, but obviously, for some reason, it has been on hold. But it is widely perceived in the United States today that a lot of American jobs have been outsourced to Indians for peanuts. And this game companies have been playing for quite some time. But Cal, with this new bill coming in, do you feel or do you think there is a possibility that jobs in India may begin to dry up? Because call centers obviously in India are not going to be the hot thing that they were, or the hot item they were 10 years ago. If the United States of America suddenly decides, or the US government suddenly decides to crack down upon companies that are outsourcing jobs to...
Yeah, a couple things. One is outsourcing began in earnest under the administration of President Bill Clinton in the 1990s. You may remember a scandal when a bunch of wealthy Chinese donors came over and donated millions of dollars to the Democratic Party in exchange, of course, for loosening the regulations to allow the opening of overseas outsourcing. The Republicans like to, let's be honest, lie to the American people, and Trump is guilty of spreading that lie that most jobs have been lost to outsourcing. It's not true. It's about 15%. The problem in the IT industry is that the call center market and the so-called services market using foreign labor like Indian IT experts is actually oversaturated, and more devices don't need a lot of support. You don't call tech support to use your Windows phone, and yet Microsoft Windows phones are known to be technically the hardest to use. I don't call Apple for my iPhone, so you have that going on. And what Trump said he would do is introduce legislation that penalized companies across the board for outsourcing, period. So they're starting with the IT sector because that was already in play under Obama. But Obama and the Democrats put the kibosh on it. Now, because they don't control anything, the Republicans control all three houses of government, including the White House, Democrats may not be in a position to stop it. So this is kind of a trial balloon, because the fact is the Republicans are known for being the party of the rich and the wealthy and the companies. Those companies want cheap labor, and yet they're not going to get it by hiring American workers. But yet record numbers of companies recently have said that they will reinvest in America, tens of billions of dollars, create millions of jobs, but there's a price. They're going to get tax breaks. That's the thing. So the companies are still going to make their money. They don't really care whether you're an Indian or an American laborer, as long as they can make their profits. So this trial balloon is going to be very interesting, because if it isn't done right, it's going to blow up in their face. If it's done right by their standards, meaning they get the tax breaks and Americans get jobs, it's going to remake the industry and, yes, harm India, which has been disproportionately dependent on the outsourcing model. And this is where part of it is India's fault. They've had now decades to find a plan B, but they have failed.
So basically, in the last 10 years, the government that was in power should have done something about it in India. Because what you're trying to say right now, Cal, is that this dream of getting a job, say in a call center in Gurgaon or in Noida, is under threat today, and these jobs could actually dry up, and all these children will be on the streets, and they'll come back to their small towns without a job, and they will add to the army of unemployed in those states, because the manufacturing base and the industrial base and the economy of the states is not exactly in very good shape in India.
Yeah, and that's India's fault ultimately. And then there's another phenomenon happening in IT. One is not only are devices less dependent on IT, but now with augmented reality and virtual reality coming, to be very blunt, that's not India's market. This is why New Zealand now, I found out yesterday when I was offered a job in New Zealand actually, that they're willing to fly you free to New Zealand now, high-tech companies, their expense for a whole week, just to interview you for high-tech jobs in augmented reality. When the iPhone 8 comes out shortly, Apple's already shown every hint that they're going to be including augmented reality with it. So India has to stop this, to use an extreme analogy, master and slave relationship here. The very idea that you're going to create millions of jobs because they're cheap, that ultimately doesn't help the long-term stability of any country. You end up with a China, and China pulls it off because they're totalitarian, not democratic. They don't care about human rights. They don't care if you make $1 an hour. India can't follow that model because you're the world's largest democracy. Then there's one other aspect, which is automation. Automation is going to put more people out of work than we've ever seen before. And that is coming. Everything from 3D printing to just devices not needing to be labor intensive to be built. Foxconn, which builds the iPhone as an example, at their peak they had 1 million workers building just the iPhone for Apple. This doesn't include iPad and other products. Now they're going to automate 90 to 95% of their factories. And they're going to do it in Brazil, where it's actually cheaper than China. So Foxconn and these guys are going to switch to robots. They don't care if people lose their jobs, and the politicians will be caught unaware with their pants down, so to speak, not prepared, because they can't even handle the situation now, let alone think 2 steps ahead.
So I think for the Narendra Modi government, this is going to be a big challenge, because Modi had come to power saying that he's going to create more jobs. Now, it seems that demonetization may not be Modi's biggest enemy right now. Donald Trump could actually be the real enemy, politically speaking, because if Trump approves this new bill, and if jobs begin to dry up in India, then India unfortunately today does not have a manufacturing base, and the Make in India campaign is still to start off. It should have been something that should have been introduced by the Gandhis during the UPA government, but they obviously failed to look at these things. They were so busy carrying out scams during the UPA regime. India is heading for a disaster where thousands and millions of youth could be laid off any day.
Very true. I think the modern politically correct term is a major course correction. Absolutely.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ajit.